Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for watching our STACchat today with Jack Teeling. Actually, pretty early in the morning for Jack in Dublin, where he's joining us from. This is our eighth STACchat, and we're really excited to have Jack be one of our guests. You know, Jack Teeling has deep roots in the Irish whiskey industry, dating back to 1782. I mean, think about that, 1782, when Walter Teeling had a craft distillery in the heart of Dublin City. Over the last 8 years, Jack and his team have established itself as the leading, most prestigious, differentiated, progressive Irish whiskey producer. Jack and his team have crafted a range of unique, differentiated, and multi-award-winning Irish whiskey, driving premiumization in the category, and is the fastest growing Irish whiskey. Jack opened the new distillery in Teeling in Dublin in 2015. The new distillery is located in the New Market and in the Liberty section. It's only a stone's throw away from where, in 1782, the first Teeling's distillery in Dublin was built over 125 years ago. A fully operational distillery, it also hosts a visitor center, which since opening has welcomed over 500,000 guests coming through, and has won accolades as the world's most and best whiskey visitor center attraction. So amazing results. Personally, Jack was honored as the Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017, as well as by the Icons of the Whiskey Ambassador industry in the year 2015 for his work in helping develop the Irish whiskey category. Clearly, you have no extra time on your hands, Jack.
Wow, it sounds so impressive when you say it. It's we've come a long way in a short period of time, and I'm delighted that I could be just the latest generation of a Teeling to put our stamp on the Irish whiskey category, and particularly at such an exciting time in terms of the evolution and the growth globally of Irish whiskey. So, delighted to be on, share some of my stories from my journey, some of the learnings from my journey. So excited, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. You know, and I was obviously with Bacardi before coming over to the college, and Bacardi made an investment in the Teeling's company as well, which was a great idea, great partnership. And I had the pleasure of meeting Jack and the team in Dublin about 18 months ago. So I can speak personally about the amazing experience of the three-pot distillery in the heart of Dublin. So Jack, let me start out by, obviously the family has a long history in whiskey and in Ireland and in Dublin in particular. So what made you kind of rebirth the company and get the distillery again in Dublin, build it from scratch? What did you see as the opportunity, and why did you take it on?
Yeah, so I got my start in Irish whiskey actually working in my father's distillery. I did commerce at university. I actually specialized in finance and went into finance to start off with. I always had this burning desire to do something myself. It was always something that I wanted to do. And I suppose when I was in college, I didn't know really what I wanted. So I did management, and then I said, I want to make a bit of money, so I'll do finance. And then I got into finance and I went, this is not necessarily for me. And I went to Australia for a year and I worked in finance and I traveled around, and I came back and I didn't really know what to do. My father said, come work in the distillery side of things for a couple of months. The plan was for 6 months, but 12 years later, I was still there. And coming into whiskey and manufacturing in general, it's so tactile. And that you can actually see something, you can create something that's uniquely Irish, that uses Irish barley, uses Irish water, Irish labor, Irish air, and becomes this product that people can enjoy and can travel all around the world. Really was a hook for me, and it drew me right in and generated this really love for the category, but also opened my eyes to the global opportunity for Irish whiskey, because that was around 2000 and a very early stage in terms of what actually Irish whiskey has become over the last 20 or so years. And that's the fastest growing premium category of spirits in the world. And it was only really starting then. So I got the chance to travel around the world trying to promote Irish whiskey, and in particular going to the US trying to, what we had in my father's distillery were some very old brands. So there were brands that have been around during the last golden era for Irish whiskey, which was in the 19th century and 20th century. But we lost our way from the 1930s to the 1990s. I can go into it, but there's a lot in it. But anyway, these were old heritage brands that we were trying to sell and promote. And I found it very hard. I found that consumers weren't necessarily buying into it. So you can have loads of history and loads of stories, but unless it kind of connects with consumers, it doesn't necessarily work. So legacy history is one thing, relevancy is a different thing. But I saw firsthand in urban centers like Chicago, like New York, like San Francisco, the emergence of craft spirits, craft beer, and also manufacturing moving back into urban centers. And they were reviving brewing, distilling in old buildings in old parts of the city, like in Brooklyn or, Anchor Steam in San Francisco and so forth. And, I planted a seed in my head. And I said, well, if I was ever going to do something myself, I'd really want to go back to where our family first started, which was in Dublin City Centre, and do something that was a little bit more modern, a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more like what people were enjoying and doing in other international centers around the world. And it was cascading from the US into other international cities, so into London, into Berlin, and so forth as well. So, people probably don't know, but Dublin is the cradle of really urban-based, city-based whiskey manufacturing, because it was really from big, large Dublin distilleries that the last golden era for Irish whiskey was created. But unfortunately, during those dark days from the 1930s to the 1990s, the last Dublin distillery shut its doors in the 70s. Right. So all that provenance and heritage that was there was slipping away. And I felt, for me, there was no real brand out there that was doing something that represented modern Ireland as well. So with all these different cues and so forth, but I continued working my father's distillery, kept cultivating these ideas, and until the opportunity came up in 2012 for me to go out and do something on my own. And I'd already processed all the thoughts and like the ideas, and it's like a business plan organically growing in your head. So when the window of opportunity came, it was easy for me just to jump and go and do something myself. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. And Jack, how do you actually start a business? We have a lot of students here, right? And I mentor a few international students actually who've come across to play soccer or football here for the college. Yeah. And, they all have sort of like you, they have some ideas in their head about, what it might be, what need are they trying to solve for, which I'm helping them along with, and then obviously building a business plan. But can you for their benefit as well as the general audience, but can you just talk about the process that you go through and the financing and how you think about that and how you hire people and what you look for as you're starting your own business, particularly with your family name on the bottle, right? So, it's got to be great.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to do it best you can, but look, it's a leap of faith. You have to believe in yourself and believe in your idea, and it's not going to be black and white. You're going to jump into a gray space. And reality for me, it is, if you wait for the perfect time, it's never going to be perfect.
Right.
There's always going to be unknowns. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be things going against, like, for example, the situation we're in now. Everyone think you're probably mad to go out there and do something in the current environment, but there's opportunities in any time. 2012, we were in the depths of recession in Dublin, in Ireland. We were enduring the worst recession we've ever been through, and one of the worst the world has ever seen, because of a massive property bubble that we actually had. There was no good news stories. It was all negative. Banks weren't lending. No one was doing anything. I was lucky that I actually had a little bit of finance behind me. I had, let's say, I was in a category that was, growing quite well, even through recession, the global kind of challenges of the financial recession. Irish whiskey was still doing well because it was seen as an affordable luxury. I believed in myself. I believed that, look, I'll start it, and this is where I think I'm going, but I didn't have anything cast in stone. It was, I was open and flexible of of getting up and going. And for me, the start, what it was important, I needed to get a couple of things in place to enable it to work. And that was one, was a start for me, a break, and to go and do it, but also it was to attract the right human resources to partner with me. And my first recruit was, because I'm not technical, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a chemical engineer, I'm not involved in the day-to-day distilling, so I needed technical skills. And I went out and recruited a previous distiller that we had in the family distillery to come and work with me. And it was very important that they shared a vision of what Irish whiskey could be, and that the opportunity was to innovate within a very traditional category and build on the taste profile that was there. And the guy I went after was, he's American, from Portland, Oregon, worked in craft brewing for a while in Intel as well, and by accident ended up in Ireland because he married an Irish woman, and she wanted to go home to have the family, to be close to her family. And we got him as a kind of innovations manager, and we got him to build a small distillery. So he had all the tools that I needed, and I knew I could work well with him. And to couple that, I had to get whiskey. So to be in whiskey, you have to have whiskey. And, I was lucky I could organize a limited supply contract. But what really was a game changer for me was I managed to get my hands on quite a large amount of whiskey that we could get under our own, let's say, roof, and then evolve it by using different production techniques to make it differentiated, to create a premium proposition that would make it stand out for the right reasons. And that allowed us then to go after that opportunity immediately. And within the first 24 months, I was exporting to around 25 international markets at that stage. But, these were a lot of contacts and relationships that I brought with me that I would have dealt with over a 10, 12-year period. And that had belief and kind of, trust that I knew what I was doing. So I could nearly grow a lot faster than probably anyone else. So that's what I believed in. I had the insight into the category. I had the relationships, and luckily enough, at the end, I had the whiskey as well to enable myself to do it.
Right. Yeah. Everyone that is an entrepreneur that I've spoken to over the years and over the last few months as we've been doing these chats with several entrepreneurs, you hear the same thing over and over again: belief in self, right? If you can believe in yourself, and then you can actually see some progress, that garners more self-confidence, and you go from there. So could you talk a little bit about, so you're pushing out into about 200 countries, I think, in terms of how do you organize I know you do the distillation and the aging. Can you talk a little bit about how you reach the marketplace?
Yeah, like route to market is critically important for any product, and particularly for our product, because you're only as good as your partner. So you can create the best product in the world, and if you don't actually, you're not able to create your own distributor in an international market, well, then you have to work with someone else. And they are representing you, and you're leveraging their route to market, their distribution strengths, their brand building strengths.
Right.
So our traditional model is to find the best independent distributor in every single market that we would go into. Right. But some markets, there are less options, and sometimes you don't end up with the strongest partner. And reality, you actually have to tailor your approach to that market based on the partner you have. For example, in Benelux, for example, in Europe, we would have a very strong partner that would sell into the specialty off-premise channel. Right. So very, very strong, deal with a lot of premium whiskeys, a lot of premium spirits. They have a great route to market and way of building the product. But if I wanted to go into the on-premise and build the brand as a cocktail brand in that market with that partner, it would fail. Right. Because they're just not set up, and you'll be forcing them to try and do something that they don't want to do or not set up to do. Right. But then you have another market where, like in the US, where you might have a very strong on-premise, and that's where the brand needs to be built, and you tailor your proposition to this. So it's you have to have a very strong central brand essence, a brand building nuance, but you also have to then find a suitable partner in every international market that fits you. And reality, when you're a smaller brand, you need probably a complementary portfolio offering. So other similar brands, so as they're selling in, there's a complementary impact, and the accounts that are already selling, they can layer on top of you. So, and you know, Irish whiskey is still quite a small part of the global spirits category. So we'll never be the most important product they have. We have to bear that in mind, and we have to use our Irishness to ensure we get enough headspace to ensure they do what we need to do, and the brand building activity that we need to do as well.
Sure.
So it's not easy. You know, getting the route to market is one point. You know, to get off the shelf and to continue to go off the shelf, that's really the hard part. But I think there's ways. Beforehand, it used to be it's still challenging, but you can talk directly to consumers now through social media, through
of course.
online, let's say activations and so forth. So your message can be a little bit clearer than before, because we found it was a little bit Chinese whispers that you'd say, you talk to your partner and you tell them what to say. They kind of go, okay, yes, I interpret this, and then say it a different way. And then they'll train the wholesalers or the distributors, and they'll say something different. So the message that you want them to say, what actually really gets delivered, you know, it can be, you know, chalk and cheese.
Yeah, because really, you don't really directly touch the consumer. You're going through a distributor or, you know, a wholesaler to be able to do that. And tell me a little bit about, you know, how do you build a brand in spirits? How do you build Irish whiskey? I mean, I've always believed, and I think we've talked, you know, as you said before, it really has to be, so the brand has to be built in the on-premise where people can experience it, cocktail, neat, however they want to take it. That's where it's built, and then the volume comes out of the off-channel. So how do you ensure that you get into the right accounts that really represent the premiumness of your brand, and that, you know, you don't wind up with the product in a place where you'd say, geez, I don't want my brand associated with that sort of, you know, outlet.
No, it's easier said than done, unfortunately, because you know, you're dealing with sales guys who just want to hit numbers, and you know, they don't, you know, at the end of the day, their responsibility is not necessarily to put you in the right account. Their responsibility is just to hit their numbers. So it's a very blunt, you know, sales too, but you can create a universe and guide rails for these guys so that make it easier. And the problem is, if you don't, you leave it gray, well, then they'll just go, oh yeah, like for us to go, we'll just go to an Irish bar. That's where Irish whiskey sells. So let's go where Jameson sells, and we'll put Teeling in there and we'll see how it goes. But that fails for us, because we're into accounts that actually take pride in what they have in their back bar, that would hand sell and upsell to their clientele, and the type of people going there are open to trying different things, or, you know, listening to the bartender and, you know, taking their advice. So a key thing for us is the engagement with the bartender community, because they're the gatekeepers. Right. But then you also have to realize that the bartenders are only part of the gatekeepers. The managers and the owners are also gatekeepers. So you got to commercially get them on side, but then have that emotive connection and get the emotional buy-in from the bartender community as well. So it's multifaceted, and you really do need to have, you know, commercial and marketing nuances to understand what's really involved. And if you just think about the marketing side of things, you'll focus too much on let's say the relationship side of things. And if you don't have the commercial, well, then you won't realize that your whiskey is not at the right price to go into a cocktail at $10 to ensure that you get on the shelf, or what sort of financial support you have to give to these accounts. So it's complicated and it's hard, but you know, it's the way it is. And for building spirits brands, you know, for me, it's grassroots marketing. There's a reason why people do things over and over and over again, which is sampling, liquid to lips. It's telling the story. It's getting in front of people, because that's what's required.
Sure.
And spirits, and brown spirits in particular, are you know, they're lifestyle decisions. You drink a brand, you know, it's ethanol. That's what it is. Okay, it could be tasty ethanol, it could be all taste different, but you know, what makes why do you drink one whiskey over the other, or one category of spirits over the other? Because it's an extension of your personality, You have to approach building your brand in that way, and trying to connect with the type of consumer, and make sure your brand stands for the values that they will relate to as well, and that they can buy into. But it doesn't happen overnight. The big brands that are around there, Bacardi brands, for example, they've been around for a long time. And there's a reason, why it's hard for the smaller brands, because it does take time to build the brand equity and the belief in the brand, and you have to continue to do the right things over and over again to get into the game. And the way it was described to me at an early age was, to get in the game, you have to have a world-class product. So whiskey has to be world-class just to get into the game. But to win, you have to have a world-class brand. So functionally has to be world-class, and then the emotional marketing values that go around that have to be there as well.
Yeah. And I guess the key is, because I think you would know better, but I would suspect that, someone who drinks Teeling also drinks other spirits. And so you really have to get into the mind share to be able to say, when I want to drink a whiskey, I'm going to drink a Teeling. So it's to get into that consumer's repertoire of spirits, so that, you're part of that repertoire, and when it's the mood for a whiskey that you're the brand they'll call out. I have to ask you, because I'm not sure everybody would know. So other than the country of origin, right, you've got relatively large Japanese whiskey industry. You've got Scottish whiskey, obviously. You've got American, bourbon, rye, and so what do you look at, or what would you say are the differences, other than the fact that they come from different domains? But what separates an Irish whiskey from, let's say, a Japanese whiskey in your mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the raw materials, the production methods, and so forth. If you think it at a functional level, what the difference is, it comes down to basically, you make a spirit. So no matter where your distillery is, you make a spirit, and it's then the environmental influence of the location that really drives a lot of the flavor that comes out of the end whiskey that comes out of it. So in our distillery, we make a spirit. In our warehouses, it evolves into a whiskey. And what makes, American, Japanese, Canadian, Finnish, Australian, everyone has their unique microclimate. And a large country like the US, there's multiple microclimates there for that will lead to different types of let's say, environments for the whiskey to mature in. So in the warmer climates, let's say for Taiwan, for example, like Kavalan, they have a lot of, let's say, interaction with the wood, because it gets hot, it gets very hot, it opens up the wood, it leads to a lot of environmental influences and a lot of water loss, and you have a flavorsome whiskey very quickly. The same in Australia, same in some other places like in the US and so forth. Well, in Ireland and in parts of, in Ireland versus Scotland, there is different climates as well. We're very temperate in Ireland. Not too hot, not too cold. So our summer is, we had a couple of weeks of some nice weather. I don't normally get as brown as this in Ireland, but we had some nice weather. I was actually on a beach in Kerry for 3 days, which is unheard of.
Wow.
It's never that warm, but it wasn't that warm. It was only around 65 degrees, but it was warm for Ireland. But not too hot, not too cold. So it leads to this really kind of soft expansion of the wood. And we say our soft, damp climate leads to a soft style of whiskey. So when people think of Irish whiskey, you think of a soft or smooth taste profile. That really comes from that maturation. What we've been trying to do is, there's some bolder flavors that come out of other categories, like in Scotland, like in the US. But Irish whiskey has probably been perceived to be a little bit lighter. For because the big brands have marketed that and done very well in that, but we're trying to evolve that taste and bring some of the bolder flavors in by using innovative cask maturation to layer on top extra flavor. So I find that temperate environment in Ireland produces a beautiful canvas that we can then layer on top interesting flavors that we can, as I said, evolve and challenge people's taste buds.
Interesting. Jack, I know you sell different aged products, right, within the category. How do you sort of think about why a 30-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old, or, how do you sort of think about what the right aging is relative to the profile you're trying to achieve, I guess, with that maturation?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you never know what it's going to be like. You can have active casks and you can have amazing whiskey that's 3 or 4 years old, or you could have a 40-year-old whiskey that just tastes like you're drinking wood shavings, like it can be over oaked. So you really don't know what that cask is going to be like. So that's why you see some of these unicorn casks, some of these very old or some very young, and they're selected for single cask. That's because that individual cask has delivered, bags of flavor. And what I always find is interesting is that you can have two casks side by side, filled at the same time with exactly the same base spirit, and they taste, radically different between the two of them. So, it's hard to know, and that's what to me is interesting, and what's unique about whiskey is that there's a chemical process that you use, and there's science behind how you distill.
Yeah.
But when you choose to bottle, or what you choose to blend, that is a true craft, and that you're using, and to me, what's craft? Craft is using your human element. So using your nose, using your mouth, your palate to choose what is right. And that's something that we feel we do quite a bit on, and we have a tasting panel because, it's very, depends on your mood, depends on the time of day. It can really influence your enjoyment of a whiskey. So we have a tasting panel of myself, my brother Stephen, Alex Chasko is our master blender, and Ian Wood, who is our maturation manager. And we all taste it together to make sure that we're aligned and that no one's in a bad mood and influencing the choice. But I'm lucky enough, being the older brother, get to decide the final vote, and that's why I get to put my signature on the bottles. But it sounds like fun, but if people start bringing you cast strength whiskey, on early Monday morning before you have a cup of coffee, it can be kind of like, okay, here we go. It's a hard job, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Jack, speaking of that, what advice would you give to younger people who are fascinated by the spirits industry, the different spirits, the process of creating a spirit, the branding, and so on? What advice would you give them to as a start? What would be an appropriate start, for someone who, unlike yourself with the family history and the experience you had, what advice would you give them in terms of how to start in the industry, and particularly if they ultimately want to do something, as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it really stood to me anyway, is having a couple of years actually in the industry myself before I went out on my own. So I could understand the channels, the pricing matrix, the reality of what, you can end up with the best wholesaler in New York and then realize that, it doesn't matter because you're one of 1,000 other brands and he's not financially incentivized to you, so you have to do it all yourself anyway. You don't learn that unless you've actually seen it. So that for me, I think maybe just a couple of years exposure to the reality of the distribution and the brand building challenges that are there, because at least it opens your eyes. And if you know that that's the way it is, then you're prepared for it and just get on with it. I also think, again, hopefully the world's a different place, but getting an international mindset is important, a global mindset. And for me, being able to travel overseas, because Ireland's a very small market. If I only stayed in Ireland and had the Irish mindset, I wouldn't see the bigger opportunity that's actually there. Sure. Obviously US is a very big market in its own right, but there's plenty of opportunities internationally as well. And I do think, I've taken a lot of inspiration from other categories and everything else that I've seen around the world and tried to bring it back to Irish whiskey. So that is important. And particularly, I think, even if from an education perspective, if there's chances to travel and see and engage with, businesses and so forth, grasp it if you get those opportunities. So there are definitely things that stood to me. But, I always you know, you get exposure to lots of different things, and you cultivate these things. You keep them in your mind. They're like little seeds, so you'll probably see nuggets of little things that little opportunities. Never just wash them away. Keep them there and cultivate them, and you'll never know when you can actually harvest them. So
Yeah.
no matter if you're young, you could be, starting off in college, you could be later in your career. There's always going to be these opportunities, and you just don't know when that opportunity will come up for you to actually take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's great advice, Jack. Look, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you getting up and early and doing this. And, hopefully I'll get to see you in Dublin when we can travel again. And if you're ever in New York, I will invite you to come to St. Thomas Aquinas College and meet some of our students and give a little bit more insight and to add on and build on what you said today. So, Jack, I really appreciate it. Good luck to you. It's exciting what you're doing, and I'll be watching from the other side and tracking your success.
Thank you, and a warm invitation to any of your students or faculty who manage to make it to Dublin. And if you're in your local bar, please ask for Teeling Whiskey.
We do. I make it so that anybody, the faculty and the staff here, they know Teelings.
Great.
Great.
Thanks,
well, thank you. Regards to Stephen and Alex, and thanks again. We'll see you soon, Jack.